All right, everybody, I'd like to welcome you to the Topspin Tennis podcast. With me tonight, we've got Chuck Tomlin and John Carpenter. Each of them are they've started up Congruent Tennis, and they're based out of the Atlanta area. I've had a chance to work with them individually. Been down to Atlanta with our son. They're phenomenal instructors. They do a fantastic job, have a wealth of knowledge that they're going to be able to share with us tonight. So I'd like to welcome Chuck and John. John, you were going to talk about like the 3 levels of CTM. Is that correct?
Right. And regarding the importance of technique. Okay. Basically the congruent tennis model, and a lot of this has been, done by various methods. There was basically 2 theories early on in tennis. You'll see this even today. I see coaches who believe that when you start a beginner, you go ahead and just work on one stroke at a time. You do 1,000 forehands. I know one coach who actually has his kids hit 3-4 hours worth of forehands, nothing but forehands. And then all of a sudden you turn around and do the backhands. Now, the congruent tennis model emphasizes that when you start people, we start them with a correct advanced foundation. And I want to give a little bit of definitions that I used in my book. But in 1915, one of the best definitions was by J. Parmley Pare, and he wrote it as particularly important to begin right, for the faulty habits contracted early are made difficult to correct, even with the greatest instruction later on. Now, this is one of the first tennis scientists. He wrote on tennis for 50 years. He literally wrote on tennis for 50 years. It's incredible, his story. He's not well known except by a few people. Dick Bradley, another of the pioneers that research uncovered to find the advanced foundation in the 1950s, never teach a position that you will have to correct later. Okay. And when Chuck came up with the congruent tennis model, we had worked with a lot of different modern tennis coaches, including one of the better ones who was acknowledged for teaching beginners. I can tell you this, I've worked with coaches, from Susan Nardi, starting little tiny tots, one of the best I've ever seen at little 4, 5, 6-year-olds. Even she could do it with yellow balls. I mean, the orange and red balls. I mean, she just looked like she hypnotized the kids. But we teach 3 basic levels. And level 1 is the basic rally and the standard second serve that you can count on all the time. We want our kids to learn to rally first. We just want to get the ball going back and forth, allowing them to move naturally, not having to think a whole lot, learn to feel the ball. As they start progressing, we like to have them not only do forehands and backhands, but we start teaching what John Eagleton calls the air attack. Those of you who know congruent tennis know that we teach a 4-dagger system. The first dagger being that biting, kicking rally ball that drives the opponent back, keeps them behind the baseline. When you do that well, you have a better opportunity to receive a ball you can then attack. Okay. That first dagger is kind of the kick serve of ground strokes. So that's our emphasis, what we call level 1 tennis. I guess that's comparable. Chuck, what would you say? I know that USTA has gone to 7 levels from level 1 through 5. I would say level 7 and 6 is level 1 tennis, wouldn't you say? Where they basically know how to rally the ball back and forth. That's the primary concern, and have a good second serve, which we teach as the first serve originally. Would you agree with that?
Are you asking me?
Yeah.
I mean, that's definitely what we're doing. For level 1 is like the entry level, the idea that allows you to get in and rally and allows you to be able to start a point with a good solid, just a solid, dependable second serve. But as you mentioned, the advanced foundation for a second serve, not just pity patted in. It's like actually serving with a proper serve technique, but and just working on a good standard second serve. But one thing I would want to mention, we can't talk about the advanced foundation without giving a little bit of a tribute to Dave Smith, who did a lot of work with developing of current and modern coaches, that we know of now.
Right.
He did a lot of work and condoned us to use that term probably maybe before you had really discovered it back, and it had been used in the past in history by other coaches, but he had sort of
Oh,
resurrected
that's
that
true.
independent.
You're right. He made me very well aware of it. And I recognize him in the book for what he did with his daughter. I mean, talk about brave to take your own kid and show it to the world how you taught your own daughter step by step. And I do want to give kudos to I'm Chuck's not a device guy, but I've been using that Grip MD with some success. That a little plastic handle with two pieces that has rubber bands that hold it over your grip. They just came out with a 4.0 that works really, really well. But yeah, I've got two 6-year-olds. I've got serving with Continental grips. They both came to me with pancake grips. And in, I don't know, 10 minutes after I took that thing off, they've now got top slice serves. And I'll be documenting this, I guess, Friday before we take off next week, Chuck. But Continental grips, learning to spin the ball, learning to drag the racket, everything in line with the desired end result. Understanding that when you have kids whose wrists aren't developed, you might have to teach them to open up the racket a little bit and lift that ball over the net. But we really emphasize that hand ahead of the racket head at contact, to kind of let that ball drag onto the strings. Obviously, they're not going to do 1.5 seconds, when they're in level 1 tennis very often, but that's for the higher level 3, which we'll talk about in a minute. But yeah, I mean, beginner kids, you just want them rallying back and forth, balanced. That's one thing that I think all great methods have in common. I know Dick Bradley taught balance in his 1958 book as the key thing. Welby Van Horn, all the great modern tennis coaches teach balance. Now, that may have to do with why certain people prefer certain types of stances than others. But yeah, level 1 is something that I have no problem getting kids to rally back and forth, generally within 2-3 hours. Even if they're in clinics, they don't always even have to have privates if you keep it real simple. Level 2 is learning to attack, which may or may not have anything to do with power. Congruent tennis model teaches that control first and power develops naturally. If you can't control the ball, there's no use hitting with power. And this is forcing the opponent into a defensive position. It includes an aggressive second serve. We emphasize slice at this level as well as various forms of topspin. So at this level, we're moving into, I guess, USTA level 5, would you say, Chuck, and working towards level 4. We don't
I'm not really that familiar with the USTA numbering system, so I can't.
Yeah, they just started it this year. Yeah, that's true.
So I can't really comment on that, but the idea is that level 1 is just like the entry to being able to rally and keep things going. It's sort of what you might, obviously we're using advanced foundation strokes, but it's sort of like what you think about as a pusher. They're not attacking, they're not trying to finish points, but they're just rallying back and forth. They got a good consistent second serve that they can use, again, all based on a advanced foundation. Then when you move up to level 2, you're graduating up. It's like going from elementary school to middle school. And oddly enough, it's middle of the court. In other words, it's when you start stepping inside the baseline and between there and the service line mostly, where you can attack the ball. Where we see most of the inside out forehands aggressively hit, where you can see some various other types of attacks. Now, we probably shouldn't try to get into all the different types of attacks there, but there are 3 or 4 ways that we use to attack balls in that middle section of the court. And it's really imperative that you know how to attack balls from there for a couple of reasons. One of the reasons is that you're actually in a vulnerable position when you're pulled into the court like that. If you don't hit a good, strong shot, then you're left vulnerable for the next shot. So it's real important that you know how to attack when you're pulled into that middle part of the court.
And this will tie
Also-
into your subject on trajectory when you speak on this a little bit later, in particular, how
Right.
use
The second
trajectory.
reason it's so important to be able to attack is my charting is proven to me. I found substantial evidence that the person who is the best at attacking in a match is the person who will generally prevail. If your efficiency percentage of being able to attack well is very high, the way that I grade, then that person's more important than serving, more important than returning. Obviously, those are important aspects of being able to play, but the real decision, the decisive difference maker between two well-matched opponents will be whoever can attack best from the middle of court. If you have a good attack game and you're executing well that day, then you're probably going to dominate or at least win the match. As you mentioned, that includes being able to be aggressive with your second serve. So in other words, your second serve is not just a second serve that you get in consistently. It's a second serve aggressive that can be aggressive, go for spots a little bit more. So we sort of think of, three levels of serve. One, like the rally, is just more consistent that you can count on. Then when you start attacking, the consistency will probably go down just a little bit. You can get by with a little less consistency when you're attacking, because you're getting the dividends and the payoffs from that attacking brings to you. So you can,
When you talk about attacking second serve, are you looking more of a slice serve? Like, is it a kick serve? Is it a little bit of both? What type of what defines attacking?
well, there's so many ways to attack with this. I think it's more or less the idea of being more aggressive. Like for instance, if you just, I don't want to say pat it in, but because that, we're still talking about having a good, advanced foundation serve. But the point is, obviously we can all stand there and just put it to the middle of the box, right to somebody's forehand, average speed, just one of those get it in kind of serves. This is a step up from that. This means that you're actually maybe trying to target, like for instance, one of the things you might be trying to attack the backhand, or even with our serve, another thing you might try to do is serve to the backhand side, but yet spin it so that it's running into the body. It's got some aggressive intent provided to it, but yet it's still not a first serve trying to go for an ace. Still
Right.
much more consistent, less risky type serve than if you were trying to serve clean winners and aces and those kind of serves. So it's that middle ground between your real consistent second serve versus your going for aces down the tee or something in between there where you can still be aggressive. And same thing, I think it matches up well with the idea of trying to rip a nice strong inside out forehand to take control and dominate the point, maybe force errors.
Right. And,
So
and of
that's
course,
at level 2, where you're not just rallying anymore, but at the same time, it falls just shy. And this is a really important point. It falls just shy of trying to finish the point. When you're attacking, you don't want to think of it just like we were saying about the serve there. We're not trying to go for aces here. We're trying to be aggressive. We're trying to cause problems. We're trying to attack the returner on the serve, but we're not trying to serve an ace. Same thing with the attacking ground strokes. We're trying to do a stroke that puts the opponent in the hurt locker, gives them problems, but we're not just trying to whip clean winners by them necessarily. We've got an attacking mindset. We're being aggressive, and we have intent. There's quite a few ways that we develop that you can attack from those areas. So I couldn't name just one, but if we were going to work with one, like say for instance the inside out forehand, you might step in and hit two or three of those in a row, hit an inside out forehand to the backhand, and then you might get a little bit weaker return and then do it again, and even though you're attacking, you'll stay patient and just continue to drive in on that inside out forehand. Maybe you get an error, maybe you catch them off balance or hit behind them. Maybe they think you're going to try to go for an inside in and change it up, and you go right back to the inside out, and it goes for a winner because they wrong footed them or something. But the point
Got it.
is you're on the attack and you're pressing your opponent.
Right.
Got
And Chuck, to follow up on that, you know, we talk about using those second, third, and fourth daggers to set up, you know, possible level threes. But I think the development of level two tennis is really important. I have an 11-year-old tonight, and this is because I knew this was my topic. I was very aware of this. So we worked on not so much finishing points, because it's so easy, especially the boys, they get obsessed with power. They get obsessed with finishing, going for the lines and doing crazy stuff. But I've got him disciplined enough to go ahead and work on, you know, that trajectory, which you'll talk about, and learning to go ahead and force, you know, a possible short ball, a possible shot that later on he'll be confident finishing, because, you know, you can't learn everything at once. And I think it's real easy to go ahead and jump ahead, and rather than learn the patience of constructing a point, working on those four daggers that we teach as forcing shots, you know, and getting us out of trouble. And I guess level
Yeah,
three.
let's go on to level three. Yeah, let's go on to level
Yeah.
three. I'm curious to hear that.
Okay. Yeah. Now level three, and Chuck mentioned this a second ago, and I mentioned you don't want to go for this too much, you know, when you're developing somebody. I think it's real easy to, but you have to be patient. It's finishing shots. And by finishing shots, we're talking about now you get a short ball. It's not just an inside out forehand. It might be a feather fade. It might be a third dagger. We teach a third dagger volley and slice up near those front cones. Those of you who are Smart Targets fans and understand how those triangles are set up and those hitting lanes. So you want to be able to hit that famous short backhand volley that Sampras hit so well. He didn't hit it deep to the baseline.
John,
you know, yeah.
John, let me simplify here though. So, you know, you're doing a great job of expanding on the idea, but the real simple idea with the third level of tennis is these are finishing shots where your intent, and you're in a position, and your intent is to finish the point. For instance, if you had hit a really good forcing shot and you're able to come to net for an easy volley that you could just volley off for a winner off the court or whatever, or maybe you've hit a good attacking shot and they try to lob you and they leave the lob short, and you can step up, hit an overhead, and just finish.
Bam, smash.
If we think about it relative to serving, the third level part when it comes to serving, it would be when you're trying to serve, you know, let's say you have a very developed serve and you have good control, good speed, and you're trying to go for going for the tee for an ace down the tee, or maybe you know how to take your serve out wide, hit close, you know, up the line and very wide. You might be able to get an ace out wide. Those would be examples of level three serves where you're actually looking on one swing of the racket to finish the point.
So it's the highest level of aggression.
And in some ways it seems simpler, you know, because you're sort of all out to a certain extent. You know, in other words, your intent is that's the last shot you hit when you hit it well. But on another hand, you know, they're very, as we all know, when you get that easy overhead, or trying to make big first serves, you know, a lot of times it's very easy to make errors when you're trying to finish. This is a good example of why pushers are so successful in the game of tennis, is because most people don't have the ability to finish that well, and therefore the pusher has the advantage, because as you try to finish against the pusher, you make more mistakes than you're actually able to finish, and that's the advantage that a pusher has against many players.
Yeah, and I coach a player currently who's great at level one, great at level two, but she's not going to win until she learns level three. And so that's become our focus now. So yeah, and it requires building on level one and two, like you say, to set up that finishing shot. So
well, one of the reasons I developed the three levels here of tennis is actually, if anybody has background in music, they know how they have to practice and play the scales sometimes to learn all the notes and that kind of thing. In tennis, I refer to it as like hitting through the progressions. So the idea would be that, let's say you start out in the rally area, you hit 2 or 3 rally shots, you earn a shorter ball so that you're able to step up into the court and hit 1 or 2 attack shots. And then your attack shots are successful enough that allows you to come forward into a finishing position and maybe hit a finishing volley or a finishing overhead. So what we try to teach the players is to actually look forward to working through the progression of point. That we actually want them to be almost a little disappointed when they earn an unforced error too early in the progression, because we really want them to have that mentality of expecting to work through the entire progression. Because that's one thing that I notice with a lot of kids is they get used to winning points out of, say, level 2 tennis. Let's say they hit a couple good rally shots, they get a mid-court ball, they hit it pretty good, and they get the easy error because they're the better player. They force the errors, and they get in a habit of winning that way. Well, they may win that way in the first couple of rounds. They may win that way against weaker players, but then that's not going to be good enough against a better player. The better players are going to force you to finish. So if you're not anticipating and expecting and planning on working through the full progression to win a point, there's a good chance that you're going to really struggle to beat the better players. The better players will force you to rally well. Then they will force you to be able to come in and attack well. And even that won't be enough. You will have to have the ability to come in and actually finish the point. If you can go through the full progression like that, you have a chance at beating a really good player. If you don't have that ability, if you haven't developed those skills and you're not comfortable working through the full progression, then you're going to find it very tough to beat the top players. And that's what makes them top players is they force you to execute on a high level on all 3 phases.
You want to go into the trajectory, Chuck, since it builds off these level 3s and particularly level 2 and 1?
Well, a trajectory is a really important, I think it's a really important concept to be able to understand the level 1 and level 2. Largely, with some exceptions, but largely when you're in level 1 and you're in the rally part of the game, which is what we refer to even if it's DNO, even if it's defensive, offensive, neutral, anything behind the baseline back there is what we call the rally area, and those are rally shots. And so when you're back there in general, the idea would be that you would have a higher net clearance. Now, to get a higher net clearance, generally, again, speaking in general terms, that means your trajectory off the racket is going to tend to be a little bit higher. Your shots, I actually don't know exactly what the degrees would be, but I would say that there's a good, and it also would depend with different players. But, even the top players are hitting a little bit higher trajectory, even Federer, even Nadal, Djokovic, as hard as they hit and as good as they play, they're still using a little bit higher trajectory when they're back in the rally for most of their shots. Then that's a big thing about understanding when you start to come into the attack area. One of the most important things you need to realize that if you're going to attack the ball, then your trajectory should be a little flatter. In other words, when the ball comes off the racket, instead of going up, it should be a lot more an out, with the idea of the net clearance being, more in the 1 foot to 1.5 feet above the net for most of the shots. So you're not going to have as much net clearance. You're not going to have as high a trajectory when you're in that level 2 attacking phase. I don't think it applies as much to the finishing phase. And this might be a good point to notice, because you don't necessarily have to hit close to the net to finish. I mean, you might be right at the net hitting an overhead or a volley. And so when the ball clears the net, it might be, 4 feet, where, say you're reaching up in the air, it might be 3-4 feet above the net, or you might be taking a ball right at net height and barely squeezing it back over for your volley to finish. So I don't think trajectory, it plays a role, but there's not any really general rules there, I don't think. The main thing I would think about when you start moving up into the court, into the finishing area, level 3 finishing area, would be start thinking more and more about taking balls off the court wider. So instead of trajectory, your thoughts would be more about widening the court, using more angles at that point. So the trajectory, another thing I wanted to say about trajectory while we're on that topic is that one of the ways we like to teach to control trajectory is with posture. When you're back there behind the baseline and you're in the rally phase, then your posture is going to be more upright, what we call neutral, maybe even sometimes lean back just a little bit. Some balls that have pushed you back and you want to get a higher net clearance, you may actually lean back just a little. We're talking about a small amount, but that will, instead of trying to adjust with your swing or your wrist so much, you can have pretty much your normal swing, more normal rally swing, and adjust your trajectory very slightly. But importantly, you can make those slight adjustments by adjusting your posture. When you step up into level 3, where you want to drive the ball more closer to the net, then our posture becomes a little more forward. We're not talking about leaning over in a huge way. We're just talking about a slight lean forward. It helps slightly change the angle of the racket. And again, it keeps us from having to make changes with our hand and our swing as much as we just adjust the posture. And now our shots come down a little bit lower and they can be more aggressive and closer to the net with a lower trajectory without making a lot of changes with your swing and hand and wrist. So the posture aspect is something I did want to mention there as it relates to trajectory. I guess the last thing I'd probably want to add on the trajectory topic is I think that when you're training a player in those first couple of phases, and phase 1, level 1 tennis, and then phase 2 with level 2 tennis, is that I think there's a lot of trajectory emphasis should be taking place by the coach and to the player to start getting control of trajectory, because I think trajectory is a really good indicator of how well you're going to be able to control and hit your shots under pressure if you understand what kind of trajectory you're trying to create each time you strike the ball. And so when you're in that rally phase and you're working for a little bit higher trajectory, you want the players to have a certain awareness of that, what they're doing, what their intent is and what they're trying to accomplish. The same thing, once you move up to level 2 attacking tennis, you want them to realize that they can come with that more attacking posture. The swing is such with the attacking posture that now they have a lower net clearance and can really drive the ball in an aggressive attacking fashion. But if you want them to be aware of why and how that happens, I think those are pretty important issues to get clear on. And from watching a lot of players, you can sort of see if you don't teach that, a lot of players may not be very clear on it.
We got some background noise. Who is that? Did you hear
That's
that?
probably my son in the other room. Okay.
Okay.
Yeah. He's online with somebody. Let me move a little bit. Okay, go ahead.
So, Chuck, you're talking about posture. That's very interesting. Further back behind the baseline, you might be a little higher, a little taller. How does spin play into that? So let's say you're 4 or 5 feet behind the baseline. You want to hit this air attack, as John had mentioned. Is that a tighter spin from back there? Is that usually? I mean, I know a lot depends on the intent. As you're moving forward, is the ball have less spin? Try to get it through the air a little more. Talk about spin and its relation to the different levels.
That's John. That's a really great point that you bring up there. Is that obviously, if we're going to hit a higher trajectory, we're going to be more focused on what we call the lift and spin, more of a low to high type stroke, which is very good for facilitating more spin, to get a ball to dip stronger with the top spin. And that would make a lot of sense that as your posture is more neutralized and more upright, as you said, and as we're lifting the ball more over the net, it gives us a great opportunity to use the legs more, to really come out of the legs, which can really help us to augment the spin and use more topspin, like you might say, a tighter spin, more rotations, more RPMs, to help bring that ball, even though we've got that higher net clearance, that extra spin will help to bring that ball down into the court for us. Then as you start to step into the attacking range, you're starting to swing more level. That's the way you're going to, a big part of why you're going to achieve that lower net clearance and the lower trajectory, the flatter type shot. I think that initially early in tennis, I think we found some evidence to support that flat used to mean, in the early days, flat meant a flatter trajectory, because all the shots are going to have spin. And I'm not really sure how it ever got twisted around that people thought a flat shot didn't have spin. Was really not any shot that I can think of that's effective that we're trying to. I admit I do it every now and then by accident. I hit a knuckleball, but it's never my intention to do that. And better players probably don't hit as many knuckleballs as I do. But we're going to spin every ball, but we're going to probably have a little less spin. Maybe half the spin when we have a more level swing, because we're not going to have the legs lifting and rising as much. The swing's not going to be low to high as much, so we're not going to get the same spin rates in general. There are some exceptions we could talk about, but for the most part, we're not going to get the same spin rates without as much lifting out of the legs and with a lower trajectory and a flatter swing. And this is a good example of why we call it congruent tennis, because as you notice how everything matches up. When you're back behind the baseline, you're lifting out of your legs, you're low to high on your swing, you're going for heavy spin, you're looking to make the ball dip and kick up. All these things are all congruent, and it's like a matching system where everything's matching up with your intent for the shot. Same thing when you move into level 2 tennis, where you're attacking. You got now less lifting out of the legs, the flatter swing.
Hold on a second, Chuck. John, can you mute your mic, because I can hear your son?
Yeah.
Why don't you mute it, and then when you're going to talk, then you can unmute it. Yeah, if you don't mind. It's kind of hard to hear Chuck.
Oop, here we go. And get it up here. Oh, there we go.
There you go. You're muted, John. Thanks. All right, Chuck. Sorry about that. I was just hearing a lot of background noise. So
yeah.
I
go ahead. Do you want to go ahead and try to sort of just do a quick recap of that last part?
Yeah, let's do it again. So why don't I ask it again, right?
Okay.
And then you just kind of repeat again what you're saying. So Chuck, you had talked about, when you're further back, maybe a little taller, and then when you're attacking, you might be a little bit more forward, a little bit more athletic base. How does that relate with spin, right? So if I'm further behind the baseline, 5-6 feet behind the baseline, my intent would be to maybe a tighter spin on the ball, more RPMs. John referenced the air attack, this number 1 dagger you guys have. So that varies, correct? According to where you are on the court and what your intent is as far as the spin. How does that relate with trajectory?
That's a really good point you bring up there, because when you're back at, everything matches up. That's why we call it congruent tennis, because of the way things match up. And yes, the idea behind having a higher trajectory, behind having a higher net clearance, would also match up very well with lifting more out of the legs and a low to high swing. And both of those things will help you to add that extra RPM as we're lifting out of our legs, and we're lifting, actually that's what lifting out of the legs helps you to do. It helps you to make your stroke more low to high in an aggressive fashion. So the more you can lift up, that's why we see players jumping and leaping as they do in the pros, is because they're trying to really come up strong. And as they do that, it helps them to bring the racket more vertical, and get that strong low to high, which gives them that tighter spin that you were referencing there. And as you lift up like that, with your posture being more upright, that's where you'll see the jumping like that. It looks like jumping. They're lifting up, bringing their strokes up high. Then as you move into the court, more into an attacking phase, as the strong players move to the baseline and inside, Now there's less lifting out of the legs. The swing gets flatter, less low to high. Now it's more of a level or flatter swing. Not perfectly flat, but because there's still some lifting there, but
Mhm.
everything becomes less dramatic, less lift out of the legs, less lift in the swing. So now the spin is probably not going to be quite as, there's some exceptions, but the spin is probably going to be a little less, maybe even as much as half what it would normally be. Guys that can generate, 2,800, 3,000 RPMs on a big rally shot like Nadal, those same guys might only get 1,800 or so spin, a flatter attacking shot. So it's still significant spin. And the only thing really flat there is your trajectory. There's still a substantial spin.
Yeah.
But you're exactly right. There's going to be that a little bit less spin and a little flatter trajectory, but that's mostly due to the flatter swing and less leg lift as you come into attack.
Yeah, that's interesting. I've never really heard anybody talk about posture as far as position on the court and what the intent of the shot is. So that's really, really interesting.
You can really see it in a lot of pro matches. If you'll start to look for it, you'll notice that when a player is 4 to 5 feet behind, you'll see that more upright lifting type posture in general. And then as you see them start to move up forward and start taking attack shots, you'll probably notice there's a little bit more of a forward crouch, ever so slightly. That none of this can be too big, but once you understand it and realize it, then you can actually notice it out of your favorite players.
Yeah, I noticed that. I did a analysis on Gasquet's one-hand backhand, and he was considerably back behind the baseline, but kind of referencing, how you talk about posture, we talk about spin, trajectory, but the tilting of his shoulders on his one-hand backhand, because you could see he was really trying to get under the ball. It was amazing, the tilt on the one-hand back and how much he was tilting back, kind of like you were referencing. It is amazing, these little nuances that these pros have in their games according to the ball they receive and what their intent is.
And that's, again, just to plug our little title there of Congruent Tennis, the idea is that everything, should be matching up. It should be congruent, because if you're back behind the baseline and you're trying to lift up strongly out of your legs, but then you're trying to do a flat swing, those two things aren't congruent. And so you're going to have that mixed message going into the ball. So everything we do is trying to send one clear message where everything that we're doing matches up with the intent of our shot. And you would be amazed, I think, when you start approaching it that way, how far less shots you miss, how many more shots that you can hit in line with your intent. And even your misses, even though you might miss a little wide or you might miss a little long here and there, you see those misses, even though they're misses, the shot flew much more in line with the intent of what you had in mind for that shot, if everything's matching up.
Yeah, beautiful, excellent. Anything else on trajectory?
Well, I think we sort of hit on the high points there. I mean, it's sort of a simple thing just to bring in the idea of being aware of your trajectory, being aware of the angle of the ball coming off the racket. Now there's some ideas that if we really wanted to get into it, we could talk about the idea of trajectory and how it affects the rising and a dropping ball. As far as, usually when we have like a dropping ball, the ball is bounced up, gone to its apex, and now it's starting to drop. Those are balls that it makes a lot more sense in our matching system to hit more of a lifting shot. So you're going to come out of the legs more on this dropping ball. You're going to lift up. Your swing is going to be more low to high, and that lines up and matches very well with that dropping ball, which also aligns up very well with maximizing your spin for that ball. If you got a ball that's flatter coming into you, in other words, it's still rising or coming close to the apex, it makes a lot more sense in many cases to swing more of a flat swing, less lift out of the legs, less low to high. You still want to use some low to high, but a lot less low to high, more of a flatter swing. Probably you're not going to be able to get quite the same spin because you have this rising ball. Because if you take a rising ball and you have a rising swing, that's sort of a bad combination. It's not very congruent for making shots.
Right.
And that's
Right.
so.
That's
But
beautiful.
yeah, I think we sort of covered the high points there, and ready to move on to your points about returning depth. I think you're looking to speak on.
Absolutely. And what we'll do is, I didn't really do an intro in the beginning, so at the end, when we're done here with the return of serve, returning deep, then I'll do a short intro at the end, and then I can splice it and cut it and add it to the beginning. So, all right. So yeah. So last topic, really want to talk about Nadal, Medvedev, these players that are returning serve considerably behind the baseline. You know, they're able to buy time, right? They can neutralize some of the big servers. They get this runway that's so much longer now, so they can, you know, like you talked about, Chuck, you know, this trajectory, able to put trajectory on the ball, you know, get a good clearance over the net, kind of push the opponent back, right? If it bounces high enough, or it's got a good enough depth, they're in the point, and they're making a high percentage of return of serves. So I've been fascinated by this. Nadal's been doing it for as long as anybody, but you got a guy like Medvedev that totally just neutralized Djokovic at the U.S. Open. He was returning considerably back behind the baseline. What do you guys think of this? Is it something you recommend? You know, especially to neutralize some of these guys and gals with big serves. Take some steps back, take a good look at it, crack the ball, get back into the point. What are your thoughts on the deep return of serve? And should everybody, is this something that a lot of people should try to implement in their game, or is it something for a select few? What are your thoughts?
Well, I think I was one of the early adopters on this because, as you know, my first son that I raised playing with some pretty big serves, I think he was serving in the 140 plus range, and that's something I learned pretty quick, that if I was going to have a chance at returning that ball, I had to be back well behind the baseline to get just any kind of decent look at it. So I'm a big believer in doing that. Although I do think that if you had servers of the quality of Pete Sampras back in the day, who had just a tremendous ability to go out wide and widen up the lanes for serving or against the returner, that I don't think people would have been able to get away with dropping back on him. I think that's one of the reasons he was so effective. If you tried to drop back on Pete like that, I think he was pretty darn good at taking the ball so wide that from that deep position you would basically never get there.
Right.
He also, if you were back that far, he was pretty darn exceptional at coming forward to take your next shot out of the air. So I think those are two things that seem to be a little bit of a lost skill now that people have pursued big serves so aggressively. Because if all you're doing is hitting a really big serve and that means you're having to serve through the court more. Therefore, you can't go as wide with those big serves, and people are not specializing on being able to come in and take the volleys as they used to. So without those two skills, it makes it a very effective position to move back there.
Yeah. I remember hearing a story. I think it was Agassi was playing Courier at the French Open. You guys remember this? And I think he lost the first two sets, and they had like a rain delay. And his coach, I don't know who his coach was at the time, but Courier just had a nasty kick serve and first serve. And his coach told him, he goes, well, just back up. Right. So Agassi backs up, starts getting a good look at the ball, starts making returns, and he ends up winning the match. And I think it was I don't know if it was the semis or the final. I can't remember. I just remember his coach saying, back up. And this could work with juniors. I mean, I'm not a tall fella. I'm 5'8", right? 5'8.5". So when I play guys that have big kick serves, I can struggle on that. But if I just take a step back, go back and kind of let that ball drop a little bit back into my zone, I seem to have no problems making returns of serve.
And what's really nice with the congruent tennis system is that you can drop back, but not so far. And we really have exceptional ability to take the ball high up around your chin,
Mhm.
up around the head in those levels.
Exactly.
The congruent tennis system shows how to extend your range and expand your hitting zone so that you can handle those high balls. Those are some of the most aggressive balls you might see some of our people hit, because they're able to hit with a nice high contact point and really come across and drive the balls from the inside. And that's very effective against a good kick serve. And it
Mhm.
also allows you to not have to move quite so far back. In other words, instead of when you're taking it on the rise, you're not trying to take it at waist high. You're letting it go ahead and rise up. And by the time it gets up around your chin, that rise is a much slower, much more manageable rise, but yet it still has a lot of good energy that you can grab hold of and use. So you can take it right up there around chin high as it rises up there, harness the energy of it lifting off the court, and really, really work on that ball without giving up quite as much court as some guys do.
Mhm. Nice. Nice. Let me ask you guys this. So let's say you're serving against a player that's, 6, 7, 8 feet behind the baseline, and they're making every return. Usually you're accustomed to getting some free points on your serve. So how do you neutralize the player that's, you kind of alluded to it earlier, Chuck, like Sampras could maybe hit a short, like an angle the ball off the court. But what are other, because I go back to Djokovic and Medvedev in the final at the US Open. I mean, Medvedev had Djokovic just absolutely clueless on how to beat him. I mean, Djokovic was serving and volleying. He was doing things that he's totally not accustomed to. So if you're the server, you're playing against somebody that's way back behind the baseline. What are you guys doing to assist and try to win some points?
Go ahead, John. You've been quiet a little bit there.
Yeah, I was just saying, I was working on this on one of my lessons this morning. She asked me that very question, what do I do when a player is fast back there and they're running up and, I've got a decent serve, and I told her to bring the ball down using the trajectory, maybe a little bit more side spin, maybe more of the pure, not so much the 45-degree slice, maybe turn it into 30, 25-degree slice, and just try not to get it to kick up, maybe skid it a little bit more. I did show her a little, and the other thing she asked me was about the wind, and where sometimes you have to toss it a little bit, not so much up, and we talk about that loading position here, but I said your launch, you may drop forward a little bit more rather than more pure up, to go ahead and get a little bit more slice when you got a ball, that's swaying in front of you, little things like that. And you can use that wind to catch them off guard by bringing that ball down and not kicking it up with too much power. So I think it's just a matter of making them move in and out a little bit more, and not focusing on so much hitting it hard and deep and through the court, as much as shaping balls and using trajectory and different degrees of spin.
Right. Yeah, I mean, like you were talking about Sampras, how good of a volleyer he was. I mean, he could, he had a great first serve, can pull the opponent off the court, come in, and rather than hitting a deep volley, he could hit like a short angle volley, like you talked about, John. So doing different things like that are a great way to neutralize these deep returners. So, all right, very good stuff. Anything else you guys want to add before we? Where can people find you? Make sure you share your website, your Facebook page. Where can people find your information?
Well, we have two real good places. The main thing, if you can just go to our website, which is congruenttennis.com, congruenttennis.com. And if you go there, we have our articles, we have some videos, and we have the opportunity for you to submit. I mean, John Frausto, you see some of your stuff is actually posted, some of your videos are featured on our site. If you're very interested in writing an article for our site, we would love to have submissions if people have ideas that they want to write about. We're a site that's looking for input. The other place is we have what we call the Advanced Tennis Foundation page. The Advanced Foundation page. I
On
actually think
Facebook.
it's on Facebook. It's called the Advanced Tennis. It's called, well, not the Advanced, it's called Advanced Tennis Foundation. I believe it's, I think that's the title there. But now again, that's a place to have discussion and look at some of the articles, but most of the articles are coming from, not all of them, but most of them are coming from our website. So you can see a lot of the same articles there, where you can read about how we teach the heuristics of how to expand and extend your hitting zone by using the congruent tennis model, by using things like the fade and the draw. I think we discussed the fade and the draw last week on our podcast with you, John.
Excellent. All right. Well, I want to thank you two for taking your time to be on the podcast. We really appreciate it. I'm sure we'll do it again. Tons of topics we could discuss. Maybe, John, the history of tennis instruction. You're doing a great job with that. You and Chuck, and just tons of topics that we could probably cover. So thanks so much, you guys. Thanks everyone for watching. If you haven't done so yet, make sure you hit that like button, that subscribe button as well. Have a good evening. Thanks everyone.